So I had a stalker for about 4 years. 4 long years of weird letters, creepy gifts, and the occasional reminder that some dude out there was a little too invested in my life. He never really threatened me directly or got violent, so I did my best to ignore him. I mean, what else could I do? The cops weren't exactly helpful. They never caught him, never really seemed to try, if I'm being honest. At first, it was unnerving. The first few letters, the pictures of my apartment from outside, even little things he pulled from my trash. But after a while, I just stopped caring. He never actually approached me, never got too close. If anything, I felt like he wanted me to react. He wanted me to be scared, and I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Then, a few weeks ago, everything changed. It all started when I posted on Reddit. I figured people might be interested in what it's like having a stalker, especially since, weirdly enough, I wasn't really afraid of him anymore. It was just another annoying thing in my life at that point. I answered some questions, joked around a little, and didn't think much of it, but he saw it, and he did not like it. At first, I didn't notice anything. No letters, no photos, no weird little packages on my car. It was actually kind of nice. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he got bored and moved on. Maybe I finally won. Then, a week later, a letter showed up. It wasn't like his usual ones. This one had printed screenshots from my Reddit post, questions, my answers, everything. There was a long, angry rant about my boyfriend too. He'd never been a fan of my boyfriend, but this was different. This was aggressive, filled with some weird obsession about how I owed him attention, how I was getting all this recognition because of him, and I should share the spotlight. A few days after that, I got a package. This time it wasn't left in my mailbox. It wasn't even on my car. No, this time it was inside the building, right in front of my apartment door. That freaked me out. That meant he had access to the building. He was in my space, way closer than he'd ever been before. I took it outside before opening it, thankfully, because inside was a mix of things that were both bizarre and deeply unsettling. Zip ties. A roll of tape, not the strong kind, just the kind you'd use for painting, but still. A TV remote with the buttons picked off. A pack of Band-Aids, some of them made to look used. Police later told me they weren't actually used, just staged. And the worst part? A framed picture of me, taken just a few days before. My boyfriend had been next to me, but he was cut out of the photo. The frame was shattered, and the box was full of glass shards, way more than just what had fallen from the frame. I called the police. They actually took it seriously this time. Promised more patrols, said they'd keep an eye out. And for about a week and a half, things were quiet. Then it started again. More letters. This time, they were different. Angrier. He wrote about how he wasted his time on me, how I didn't appreciate the effort he put in, how I wasn't as special as he thought. 5 days ago, I stepped out of my apartment and felt something crunch under my foot. He put broken glass under my doormat. I was in a rush for work, so I just brushed it off, figured I'd call my boyfriend and have him deal with it. But when I got to my car, I realized it wasn't just the doormat. My car was wrecked, scratched up, lights smashed, windshield covered in paint. And across the hood, in big messy letters, was a phrase. "It's time soon, miss," my last name. I ran back inside and called the cops. They found the same phrase on a note under my doormat. This time, they really took me seriously. Maybe it was my tone, because at this point I wasn't even scared, I was furious. They took my dashcam footage, which thankfully had caught something. It wasn't great quality, but they said they'd finally look into it properly. Promised even more patrols. And then, for 2 days, it was quiet again. Until 2 nights ago. Just after 4 a.m., my doorbell rang. My boyfriend and I both woke up, groggy and confused. But then I saw flashing blue lights outside. Before I could even move, I heard voices. "This is the police. Please open the door." One of my neighbors who worked night shifts had come home about an hour earlier. He noticed someone slip into the building right before the door shut. He waited, peeking through his peephole, watching the motion-activated lights. And then he saw a man heading upstairs, toward my floor. There are only 2 apartments up there. Mine and a single mom with 3 kids. Not exactly someone expecting visitors at 3 a.m. So my neighbor called the cops. They found him on the stairs just 1 floor above me. He had a pocket knife. He confessed immediately. Just straight up admitted he'd been my stalker for the past 4 years. They finally got him. It took 4 years, a Reddit post, and one very observant neighbor, but they finally caught him. He's facing multiple charges, and I've got a mountain of evidence stacked against him. I don't know what's going to happen next, but for now, for the first time in a long time, I actually feel safe. Or at least, safer than before. So, I was about 25 or 26 when this happened, working as a researcher at a university. Despite my position, I looked young enough to be mistaken for a student, which probably didn't help in what was about to unfold. Some days, when the weather was nice, I'd spend my lunch break outside, either strolling through campus or sitting under a tree, just enjoying the fresh air away from my cramped lab. One particular day, I was on a bench when a guy walked up and asked if he could sit next to me. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I said, sure. He made small talk, and I responded politely, but kept things vague. Then he casually mentioned that he had seen which building I worked in. That set off a tiny alarm bell in my head because I had never noticed this guy before. But I brushed it off. Maybe he had just happened to see me around. He asked if I was a student, and I told him no, I worked at the university. He said he was an engineering student, and a few minutes later, asked me if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I declined, telling him I had a boyfriend. He seemed to accept that, and we went our separate ways. I figured that was that. A week or two passed, and I was outside again, sitting on a different bench. Out of nowhere, the same guy showed up. He asked to sit next to me again. Now, I was feeling really uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude, so I just nodded. We made small talk, but my mind was racing. Was he about to ask me out again? Sure enough, he did. And once again, I politely reminded him I had a boyfriend and wasn't interested. He left, but now I was anxious. This wasn't a coincidence. A few days later, I left work and started my usual 10-minute walk to where I parked my car. The university's parking fees were ridiculous, so I always opted for free street parking a little farther away. My walk took me through quiet residential streets, barely any car traffic, not many people around. Halfway there, I noticed someone on the opposite side of the street, a few paces behind me. I caught him in my peripheral vision and didn't want to turn my head to confirm my suspicion. It could have just been another person walking home, right? But then he turned when I turned. I sped up. So did he. My heart started pounding. This was real. This was happening. I wasn't imagining things. I picked up my pace, almost jogging now. He started running to match me. And worse, he had crossed the street. He was on my side now. I was almost at my car. I just had to cross one last busy road and sprint about 100 meters. But the crossing part worried me. Sometimes traffic made it impossible to cross quickly. If I got stuck waiting, he'd catch up. My pulse was in my throat. Then, like a miracle, a gap in traffic opened up the second I reached the street. I bolted across, turned back, and yelled, "Stop following me." That's when I saw him clearly. It was him, the engineering student. He was standing there across the street, breathing heavily. "Can I just talk to you?" he shouted back. No, you absolutely cannot. I turned and kept moving, not even caring if he saw which car was mine. I just wanted out. He didn't follow. He never crossed the road. When I got home, I broke down. I wasn't hurt, but I was shaken. The whole thing felt surreal, like something that happened to other people, not me. I started walking with a coworker most days, and even changed my parking spot for a while. For weeks, I kept looking over my shoulder. Then one day, I saw him again. It had been weeks. I had mostly stopped eating lunch outside, choosing the safety of the lab. But occasionally, I'd grab food from the student center. The food court was packed, shoulder to shoulder with students. I was waiting in line for a burger when I heard someone calling out over the noise. I looked up. It was him, waving, trying to make his way through the crowd toward me. My blood went cold. Without thinking, I raised my voice, louder than I ever had in public, and yelled, "Leave me the fuck alone." Instantly, people turned to stare. His expression dropped. He froze. Then, just like that, he backed off, disappearing into the crowd. I don't even remember if I got my food that day. My hands were shaking too badly. That was the last time I ever saw him. It's been about 6 years since all of this happened, and I still work at the university. I never learned his name, so I couldn't even report him. But I never forgot his face. To this day, I stay hyper-aware when I walk alone. I don't know what his intentions were, and I don't want to. I just hope, for everyone's sake, that he never did this to anyone else. Years ago, after graduating high school, I was still living at home. One hot summer night, while packing for a camping trip, I had my window open. It was around 2 in the morning when suddenly a hand reached through the gap in the screen. I screamed, and the hand disappeared instantly. For a moment, I thought it might be my younger brother pranking me, but when I looked outside, I saw the silhouette of a man staring back at me. Panicked, I ran to my brother's room and found him playing video games. We called the police, who searched the area but found nothing. They told us to keep our windows and doors locked and left. My mom had a gut feeling he'd return, so she waited outside on our back porch. She was right. About 20 minutes later, she saw a man dressed in black creeping into our backyard along the tree line. He hid behind a tree, then moved to another, gradually making his way toward my window. When my mom yelled at him, he ran. The police came back, but once again found no trace of him. After that, I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of it, until 6 months later. I had moved into an apartment downtown with a friend. It wasn't the best place, but we were excited to have our own space. The downside? Only street parking. Within a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but a single rose had been left on the passenger seat. It was unsettling, but I convinced myself it was just some random creep. But then it happened again, and again. Almost weekly, my car was broken into, and each time something was left behind. A flower, a pair of men's underwear, a bag of my favorite candy. That last one made me realize something. This wasn't random. Whoever was doing this knew me. Things escalated. One day, I went to the laundry room in our apartment's basement and found all my undergarments missing from my load. Another time, a male friend's tires were slashed when he visited. Then, the first letter arrived. It was long, obsessive, and detailed how this person had been watching me for years. I had already started looking for a new place and was able to move in with another friend in a secured building with underground parking. For a few months, things were quiet. Then, my new roommate, Ashley, got a boyfriend. Ashley met Matt on MySpace. He was extremely good-looking, which seemed odd to us, given that Ashley had never been in a relationship before. She was thrilled, but something about him creeped me out. He was quiet, always wore this strange, leering smile, and seemed off. His MySpace page was sparse, only pictures of himself and barely any real interactions with his friends. We all tried to warn Ashley, but she got defensive. Matt started spending more time at our apartment, and I avoided being home as much as possible. One day, I came home from work to find Matt alone in our living room, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and had told him to wait for her. I was furious, but didn't say anything. I grabbed a beer and a snack and went straight to my room, locking the door. 30 minutes later, Matt knocked on my door, saying we should get to know each other since we both cared about Ashley. Reluctantly, I agreed to watch a movie with him just to keep things civil. I focused on the screen, avoiding conversation, but at one point, I glanced over and found him staring at me with that same unsettling smile. "What?" I snapped. Still smiling, he said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked, now deeply uncomfortable. He didn't answer, just kept smiling. Every hair on my body stood on end. I excused myself, locked my door, and stayed there until Ashley got home. Over the next month, Matt practically moved in. I started looking for a new place again. Then, on their 6-month anniversary, I came home to a bouquet of flowers and an opened card on the table. Out of curiosity, I glanced at the note inside, and my heart dropped. The handwriting was identical to the letters my stalker had sent me. Shaking, I ran to my desk and pulled out the old letters I had kept as evidence. It was an exact match. Matt had been my stalker all along. I called the police, then Ashley. She was at work, but said she'd come home. The police arrived and took my statement. When they spoke to Ashley, she was furious and called Matt, leaving him a voicemail, despite the cops telling her not to say anything. After that, he disappeared. There was no record of a Matt working where he claimed. Ashley had never been to his place. He had told her he was staying with friends to save money. She had never met his family or any of his supposed friends. It was all lies. We didn't even know if Matt was his real name. The final horror came when we went through the things he left behind. In his duffel bag, among gym clothes, we found 10 pictures of me. Some were taken from a distance, but one was of me sleeping in my current apartment before I started locking my bedroom door. Some photos dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, confirming our worst fear. He had been stalking me for years. There were also 2 pairs of my missing underwear, a Starbucks lid with my lipstick marks, and even a necklace I hadn't noticed was gone. The police never found him. I took a job overseas and left. Ashley and I drifted apart. She struggled to accept that her Prince Charming was a predator. I still carry the trauma. Even living across the world, I was always looking over my shoulder. I have no social media under my real name. I'm married now, with children, and I know that he moved on to torment someone else. But every time I visit my hometown, I stay under the radar, always wondering if Matt will ever resurface.